Hello, and welcome back to 100 Days of Clarity. Today, day 18, we are going to wrap up our Community Hello World contract by filling in and implementing all of the right functions that we commented in the previous video. This is going to be, as you're going to see, this is going to be mainly on the short side because, again, the key part of programming Clarity is to know exactly what every line you're implementing is doing. Because again, in the blockchain environment, that concept of immutability, it cuts both ways. So it's worth slowing down and nailing every single line, which is why we outline every step before we go ahead and write it. Today, though, we're going to go ahead, fill it in, and then we're going to wrap the day up with some manual testing. We've done that before. We're going to continue doing that. And that should be it for our very first contract. So, short intro. Let's go ahead and get right back to the contract. Open up your IDE, open up your terminal, and we are good to go. So, if you have the Community Hello World contract open already, head to lines 46, where we start the update billboard function, right? And so the update billboard function, as we see, the first comment that we have highlighted out is assert that TX sender is next user. Okay. So we already know that next user is the person that is going to update this billboard. And so we're going to go ahead and just write in that asserts function. So asserts, as you guys have seen before, Boolean expression. What are we trying to check for? Well, we're trying to check an is equal, correct? We're trying to check, is this the TX sender, the person signing this transaction, is that principal equal to the new user? So is equal, and TX sender, and then again, we want to check against new user, but new user is a variable, so we need to var get next user. Okay, and then for the error, the throw message here, what we're going to do, and what I usually tend to do, is I will leave it as just an increasing integer. So this first error message we're going to leave as error u0. And the next throw or error message we come across, we'll write in as error u1, and so on and so forth. I usually like to just finish writing out all the error messages first, and just with numbers, if there are any other errors that are the same, write in that same number, don't increase the counter. And then once we finish with our contract in its entirety, we'll go back through and write much more useful error messages. So for right now, we're going to leave it as error u0. Okay, so next line, assert that updated username is not empty. And updated username, right, so that means the string, and updated username is, again, the function. Updated username is the parameter within the update billboard function. So here, all we need to do is check, is someone submitting a blank string? And so we're going to go ahead and, instead of doing an is none, which is what you would expect, we need to actually check that the literal string is empty. Because again, our parameter updated username is a string. It's not an optional. So if it's a string, but it's an empty string, then we just want to check literally that this parameter is equal to just an empty string. So is equal again, and we're going to write our parameter updated username, and then we're going to pass in just an empty string. For our error message, u1. Okay, and now we're going to go down to our final line. And so if we check that the person calling is the next user, and that the name that they're submitting is not false, or sorry, is not empty, then we feel confident in letting them update the billboard. So here we're going to go ahead and update the billboard, which, as we know, is a tuple. So we're going to first var set, because again, we're setting a variable, we're updating it. So we first need to tell Clarity we're setting it. So var set, and we're going to set the billboard, which again, we've just named it billboard. And then we're going to set it as a new tuple, or we're going to set a new tuple. And here, I'm just going to enter space space so that we know the two properties that we are entering into a tuple. And again, if we scroll back up, we can see that we define a billboard as a tuple of two different types. There is new user principal, which is again the principal or TX sender that is calling the function or setting the billboard. And then new user name, aka what is their nickname, right? So we scroll back down, we know we need both of those properties, new user principal and new user name. So I'm actually just going to copy them, paste them here. Again, make sure our indenting is correct, so this is legible. We already have TX sender as new user principal, which is what we want. And then for new username, we're of course just going to pass in the parameter updated username and save. Okay, and that concludes the update billboard function. The only thing we're going to do here is, remember, we have an OK true just as a placeholder so that the public function, which requires a response at the very last line, doesn't give us any errors while we're testing. Now that we're done with the function, we're going to wrap our last function, which is a var set function, with an OK response. So that's all I'm going to do. And that is our finished update billboard function. Next, we're going to go ahead and tackle the function underneath it, which only an admin can call. And it's how we tell Clarity or tell this contract who the next user or the next principal is going to be that can update the billboard for their community hello world. And as you can see in the comments below it, we already have the description, a function used by admin to set and give permission to the next user. And we also have parameter, which is just an updated user principal. So the principal that is going to be allowed to update the tuple or the billboard tuple. Okay, so let's start one line at a time, one comment at a time. First, we need to assert that the TX sender is admin. Okay, that should be simple enough. If you need a refresher, scroll up and you can see that admin is just a constant. So we actually don't need to var get. We can just refer to it as admin. So asserts is equal. And as you guys can see, you're going to use is equal with TX sender quite often. Admin. And then again, an error message, which we're going to write as U2. Now as U2. This error message is not that different from line 50, where we're also checking an is equal in the TX sender. But here's where you want to be as specific as you can get with the error messages. They both are the same type of functions, but it would be useful for developers to know where it's failing. And so we're going to go ahead and leave them as different IDs for now, or different UINTs. Assert that updated user principal is not admin. So we need to assert that the parameter being passed is not the admin. So not, and same, is equal, TX sender, updated user principal, the parameter. And this would also constitute a different message, since this time the error would be the admin is trying to make themselves the next principal. So we're going to write in U3, assert that user, okay, and the next function, we need to assert that the updated user principal is not the current next user. So this would basically be if we're trying to duplicate or pick the same person twice. Asserts not, and again, is equal, but here we need to use var set because we know that, sorry, we need to get var get because next user is currently a variable. So is not is equal tx sender var get next user. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and write one more error message here. Again, we just want to be as descriptive as we can, especially in these earlier examples. And if all goes well and those three checks or those three asserts are, they pass through without any problem, then we can go ahead and allow our admin to update with var set the new user or the updated user principal, right? The person who's going to be able to update the billboard next. Okay, so var set, we need a var set next user with updated user principal. Okay, and just like the function above it, once we've concluded the function and we have our last line, just go ahead, remove that OK true, and just wrap the last function in a response type. Okay, cool. And so we've now finished the update billboard function, the admin set new user function, and that should conclude everything that we need for this contract. As you can see, we have no error messages, so let's just head over to terminal and let's automate, and let's manually test. And for note, we're around 12 minutes in, so we're just going to do a couple minutes of testing and then wrap up this session. Make sure you're in the right directory, 100 Days of Clarity. Well, for me, I have an extra V. And then run Clarinet console to spin up your local environment. Awesome. As you can see, Community World is the last contract here, making it easy for us to see the 4 functions that we've written. Get billboard, get new user, update billboard, admin set new user. Okay, and actually, as we see here in line 14, by default, we set next user to TX sender initially. So that means we, the admin, can go ahead and update the billboard first. So let's go ahead and test manually doing that. So contract call .community world, because again, we're signing the transaction as the deployer or as the person that was registered as TX sender when the contract was deployed. Community hello world, and we're going to call update billboard. And again, this has a simple parameter of just a string. And so for me, I'm going to type in set Zeus in quotations and type in enter. Okay, cool. So I got an error 1. Again, this is where these error messages are very useful. Let's go ahead and see what error 1 is. Okay, update billboard. Assert. Okay, cool. So we see that we got back an error U1. So we can go back to line 53, and we see that assert that updated username is not empty. Oh, cool. Perfect. So we can actually see why this is failing. If we reread the comment slowly, update that the updated username is not empty. Currently, we have it as is equal updated username to empty. So this is checking and saying, hey, updated username has to be empty or else throw error U1. Obviously, that's not the behavior we want. So let's go ahead, fix that, wrap that in a not, close parentheses, save. And now press Control C twice and then spin up the environment again. We're going to call set Zeus again. Sorry, we're going to call update billboard function, passing set Zeus again. Cool. Now we got an OK true. And let's go ahead and call get billboard. And if we call that, we'll see the billboard, which should give us both a principal and a name of the person that updated it, which in our case is us. So get billboard. Oh, sorry. I had two functions in the parameter. So I need to delete update billboard. Okay, cool. And if we call get billboard, we indeed see new username, set Zeus, and new user principal, the principal that deployed the contract, this one. Now we're going to go ahead and select who the next person that can introduce themselves to the network is going to be. Let's go ahead and pick this third address. So what we're going to do is copy paste this. And then underneath, instead of calling, get billboard or get new user, we're going to call admin set new user. And we're obviously going to pass in this principal that we just copied. And we get an error message. Okay, and what error message do we get? Again, we get error U4. So let's go back here and we can see line 76 is where we get error U4. Okay. So first, let's read the comments. Assert that updated user principal is not current next user. Okay, assert that updated user principal is not current next user. Okay, cool. We immediately see the mistake here, or at least I immediately see it here. We're supposed to be checking that updated user principal. The parameter is not equal to next user, the variable. Here, when flying through this, we just erroneously wrote in TX sender when what we mean to write is updated user principal. Okay. Now we're going to go back, Control C twice. Okay. Spin up our environment again, and we're just going to go through the same functions. I'm just going to fly through them. So update billboard, get billboard, and then admin set new user. Okay, true. So that function worked. And just to confirm, we can go ahead and call and test our last function. And again, this is what constitutes manual testing, right? It's in the name. You're manually testing. You're testing out the happy path, the critical path. And then after that, you want to do edge cases. Is this how you should be finalizing your testing? Absolutely not. This is just a way of getting out basically a rough first draft. We will have videos on writing automated tests, but for this first contract, I just want to get us through it. So we're doing manual testing through, the happy path. Okay, so community hello world, we're going to call now get next user, and we expect it to spit back the principal that we just provided in admin set new user. And indeed it does. It's this third variable. And so now we're actually going to go ahead and in this local environment change the TX sender to that third principal, and we're going to update the billboard one last time. Okay, TX sender, set TX sender. Okay, and I got some issue there. Sometimes I forget these commands, and so I need to write in help. Okay, cool. So set TX sender. Okay, so now we're switched to this third address, and we're going to go ahead and call update billboard. But again, since we changed the person since we changed who the TX sender is, we also need to change how we call the contract. We can no longer use a shorthand .notion. We now need to copy the big address, so the entire literal principal. So contract call, again, apostrophe, this entire thing, and then update billboard. And we are going to pass in the name Jordy. And press enter. And we see, okay, true. So we now have a new person that has introduced themselves to the network through this community billboard. And again, we can just test reading it one more time. And we indeed get billboard. Cool. One last note before we wrap it up. I know this actually went way over now than we discussed. Error messages. So I'm gonna leave these to do on your own, but scroll back up to where you have constants and write in useful error messages. We're gonna go ahead and just do one and then call it a day. So error messages. Define, again, they're always going to be constants. And they're usually all capital error using ERR and then a dash between everything or hyphen between everything. So the first one, the first error that we see in the contract is assert that the TX sender is next user. Okay, cool. So a good error message here would be error TX sender and not next user. And yeah, again, the point is to be as descriptive, as exact as you can. And then we're going to replace the expression all the way on the right with our actual error response, which cannot be capitalized. So error U0. And then we copy paste this new message and replace it in our function below. Awesome. So go ahead and do that yourself for the remaining 4 error messages, or 4 error messages. And congrats. You finished your very first Clarity Smart contract all the way from scratch. This wasn't necessarily easy, and it was a complicated hello world that took you many, many concepts to put together. So give yourself a congrats, take a breather. Tomorrow, we're actually going to go over deploying these contracts, and we're going to do it on the terminal. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, but it's imperative that as a Clarity engineer, you don't ever fully rely on a client or front end. Of course, it's great to be able to use the Block Explorer and other things to deploy contracts, but when push comes to shove and nodes are down or front ends are down, it's best that you know how to do things as basic as you can get with terminal. So thank you for your time. I will see you tomorrow for day 19.